The AmericasDemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, is made possible by contributions from our listeners. Want to do more? Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click Donate. And thank you for allowing us to be your voice. This is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. Globalist Edward Goldberg warns that an America First agenda increases the chances of war because of economic disruption. Professor Todd Gitlin says progressives have a problem. They're afraid of power. And Bill Press talks with political analyst Steve Phillips. Had enough of Fox News, the House Freedom Caucus, and Donald Trump? If you want the facts that you won't get from them or from the fake news sites of the alt-right, then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Professor Eddie Goldberg warns that Trump's America First agenda represents a 19th century view of the world, which is really the same as Putin's. And we say hello to Edward Goldberg, who teaches international political economy at New York University's Center for Global Affairs. He is also president of a consulting firm focused on global economics and trade, and is the author of a new book called The Joint Ventured Nation, Why America Needs a New Foreign Policy. Eddie Goldberg, thanks so much for joining us today on AmericasDemocrats.org.
And thanks for having me.
Our pleasure to have you with us. Your book shows how globalization has turned once sovereign nationalistic countries into partnership with corporations, banks, politicians. Is that something we need to be worried about, or is this just a natural evolution?
Well, I don't think it's turned countries into partnerships with corporation banks and banks. I think we're still, for instance, the United States is a representative democracy. It's not ruled by banks and corporations. And banks and corporations are just one of the many, many groups that have influence on our democracy. I don't think giving up some sovereignty is something we need to worry about. I think, I view as a world that's changed because of how we become interlinked under globalization. We are no longer the United States, I think, unlike how Donald Trump sees it. We are no longer the indispensable nation. We're the indispensable partner. We're the managing partner of this vast network of interlinked economic trade relationships.
Are nations, though, in fact, becoming less sovereign, less in control of their own economic fate?
Yes, they are. And, we can go on and on. I mean, all from the time of the end of World War II, this has been an evolution that's been happening, and to a certain extent, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the world is becoming interconnected. The markets of the world are becoming interconnected. Ours with China, ours with the European Union, who, as many people don't know, is our largest trading partner, not China. But I think it also, I think as we become more interconnected, there's less of a chance of war. I mean, we depend upon each other. And we have various groups in each national capital that says you have to, be softer on your relationships and more understanding of the other countries. Let's look at the difference here between Russia and China. It's actually an interesting difference. China, we have major economic relationships with, whether it's all the agriculture we ship to China, whether it's all the business GM and Apple does in China, whether it's all the imports of clothing and other materials we buy from China. There are huge interest groups in each capital, in Beijing and Washington, to soften these relationships, not to let them get out of control because of this interconnectedness. Where, on the other hand, with Russia, interestingly enough, we do the same amount of business with Russia as we do with Thailand. There are no major constituencies in Washington saying, let's look at how we can soften our relationship with Putin, forgetting whether that's possible or not. And the same thing on the Russian side, because there are a few interconnecting economic relationships.
Now, you also talk of a new role for America, which you say is trapped in yesterday's world. What is that role, and how do you see Donald Trump approaching it?
Well, as I just said, we are no longer the indispensable nation, but the indispensable partner. In a way, in my view, we're the center node of a network. We have to look at the world today as a network philosophy and orientation. Just like, we look at, I'm talking to you on my iPhone, and it's a perfect example of this network. It's interesting. Only 4% of my iPhone's value is from China. That's the assembly. The heads of the iPhone, the brains of the iPhone are from Silicon Valley. The marketing and the financial part of the iPhone is from Silicon Valley. Then parts of the iPhone are from Germany, from Israel, from South Korea, from Japan. It's a network. It's all put together. Well, I think we're now the same thing. We're the managing partner of this network. Donald Trump sees it differently. Donald Trump sees that America is not just the indispensable nation. It is, the go-alone nation, the American First Nation. I don't think that world exists anymore. I think that's bringing us back to a 19th century view of the world. Well, and it's very much of a Putinist view of the world. And I think that view is in direct conflict with the economic realities today in the world.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Edward Goldberg, who teaches international political economy at New York University Center for Global Affairs, also the author of a new book called The Joint Ventured Nation, Why America Needs a New Foreign Policy. Eddie, you've got a chapter on paradoxes in which you define the paradox of authority, focusing on China and Germany. What do you mean by the paradox of authority?
Well, it's interesting, in political science and in economics, paradoxes are a big deal. The easiest one in economics is John Maynard Keynes' paradox of thrift, where probably one of the most famous ones also, where the idea is you do something, the opposite happens. So in Keynes' paradox of thrift, when you're in bad times, you want individuals to spend, but the opposite happens. They're frightened and they save because they think they're going to lose their job or their house, so they don't want to spend. So that's a typical paradox. Well, here I'm talking about the paradox of authority. And what's happened here is we've seen since World War II, when countries give up some economic sovereignty, they gain power. So you would think, hey, we're going to give up some sovereignty. It's going to make us weaker. The opposite has happened. And the two great examples are, first, when Germany joined with France in 1951 and formed the European coal and steel community. Essentially, what they did was say, we are going to make an uber government above our own governments to control together our coal and steel production. This eventually led to the common market. This eventually led to the European Union. Germany just became stronger and stronger as an economic unit by giving up some parts of its economic sovereignty in Europe. The same thing happened with China. In China, when China joined the WTO in 2001, they had to reduce 7,000 tariffs and quotas. There was a big fear within the leadership circles that their agriculture would not be able to compete. Zillions of people would lose their jobs in agriculture, and their old state-owned enterprises wouldn't be able to compete. Well, the opposite happened. By joining the WTO, by reducing some of their sovereignty on all these tariffs, on these 7,000 tariffs, they, in fact, boom, they became part of the globalized market.
Now, so are all the campaign promises we heard about fixing the economy, is that just a lot of hot air if the President of the United States doesn't have much authority in such matters?
Well, I don't think so. I think the one interesting thing, the one fundamental issue that both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were aligned on, and were actually outbidding each other, is on infrastructure spending. And you look what's happened, especially to some of the industrial areas of America that have been hit, actually more recently now, with automation, more automation than international trade. In fact, international trade has been the boogeyman here. We're no longer losing jobs to international trade. We're losing jobs to automation. If you look at, for instance, the automobile industry, in 2015, the U.S. manufactured 12 million cars, double the quantity of the early 1950s. Yet the amount of employees in the car industry is 900,000 people, the same amount of people in 1953. The difference is automation. Look at the camera. Look at Kodak. Kodak used to employ thousands and thousands of people in upstate New York and Rochester. It's been replaced by the iPhone to take pictures. No one's buying brownie cameras anymore. I don't think they're made. The iPhone took that market. Look at books. Half of the sales of my new book are from e-readers, iPads or Kindles. Mm-hmm. So it's the automation that's changing the job. So what do you do with these people who cannot? Not everyone can be a computer engineer, and that's why infrastructure development and job education combined are so important. And so the government does have a role. I mean, one of the problems that has happened over the past 8 years is, of course, the Obama administration recognized this, but the Republicans, still believing in Reaganism, wouldn't do the fiscal stimulus needed on infrastructure that would have given jobs out. Interesting enough, Trump actually is anti-Reagan here in saying, I don't care. We need this infrastructure. We need this commitment of money to rebuild America so we can give jobs to these people. I mean, very much in anti-Reagan type philosophy. Yeah. It's fascinating. Yeah. So I think government does have a role.
Another paradox, perhaps, is that while globalization has raised the standard of living around the world, it also unleashed climate change, terrorism, and immigration problems. How do you see that playing out in the future?
This is a huge problem, huge problem. I call it the three scourges in the book. They're very much related. The Pentagon did a study in 2015 on how part of terrorism has come about because of drought in the Mideast. Immigration has come about because of terrorism in the Mideast. And immigration directly challenges the cohesion of some parts of globalization, specifically the European Union. Terrorism threatens us all. Global warming threatens us all. I mean, here you truly need government action. And it's amazing to me about the ostrich position of some members of the Republican Party in terms of global warming, not seeing, for instance, the Pentagon says that global warming has an effect on terrorism, but they don't want to recognize it. The Pentagon has plans to what happens strategically for the United States when various areas of the world, cities, are under pressure from globalization. So that these people in Congress are voting for the Pentagon to make these studies and make these plans in terms of, I said globalization before I meant global warming. The Pentagon is making these plans and studies what to do in terms of how global warming affects the health, the military position of the United States. These people are voting for it, but they don't recognize that they've been voting for it. So there's a disconnect here. Mm. So it's the three: global warming, immigration, terrorism, are major problems, can only be faced with strong leadership, and to deny that it's happening is, I think, by many members of the Republican Party, one of really the more than foolish, one of the really dangerous actions that could happen to our country to deny this is happening.
Okay. Edward Goldberg, teaching international political economy at New York University Center for Global Affairs. He's also the author of a new book called The Joint Ventured Nation, Why America Needs a New Foreign Policy. Eddie, thank you so much for your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org. We look forward to having you back again soon.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen to this americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats. But we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.
Social Security measure. I believe that we must pass legislation to provide medical care.
This is our tradition. When our grandparents came to America, it was the Democratic Party which said, welcome. It was the Democratic Party, the party of Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy and others, who said that America belonged to all its people, not just a handful of the rich or a few giant corporations. That's why great leaders like FDR fought so hard for Social Security, and why JFK stood up to the insurance companies and their Republican allies to get Medicare. It's not just one thing, or one time, in one place. It's about a whole history of standing up to the Republicans and saying someone has to be on the side of regular working people in America, whether it's defending Social Security or just the way your loved ones are treated on the job. That's what the Democratic Party is all about. And that's why this message has been brought to you by the Democratic Party. Working people like you and me.
Paid for by 21st Century Democrats. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. Todd Gitlin was a central figure in the protest movement of the 1960s, and he urges the Trump resistance to organize around a central point, despite divergent ideologies. More on that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
I love the names. Bobcat Farm, Golden Eagle Ranch, Long Prairie, Pintail Vineyard, Roadrunner Ranch, and 10 Mile Farm. They conjure up Americana, the old home place, and our rich rural culture. Less bucolic, however, is the fact that all are part of a massive Wall Street investment scheme called Farmland Partners, Inc. It's run by a couple of slicks trained in mergers and acquisitions as executives at the investment powerhouse Merrill Lynch. Rather than sodbusters, Farmland Partners are taxbusters, using a legalistic plow called REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, to get enormous tax breaks to subsidize their scheme. With this special subsidy, the partners have attracted hundreds of millions of dollars from investors to buy up farms and ranches. They now own 295 ag properties, covering 144,000 acres in 16 states. Of course, the Wall Street plowboys don't soil their own soft hands by actually farming. No, the syndicate hires tenant farmers to do the sweaty work of plowing, planting, and nurturing the crops. This tenant system produces a double-line cash flow for the faraway owners. Farmland Partners charges the tenants rent for tilling the corporate soil. Then the partners harvest a sweet share of any profits from the sale of crops the tenants produce. Meanwhile, the young farmers America desperately needs, those who actually want to, farm, are having a hard time finding affordable land to get started. These new generation farmers can easily be outbid for good land by Wall Street speculators who have the cash flow from tenants and the subsidy from taxpayers to underwrite their financial contrivance. This is Jim Hightower saying, to prevent the money schemers from literally walling off young farmers and to fight this insidious Wall Street takeover of agriculture, connect with youngfarmers.org.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. Todd Gitlin, who chronicled the 1960s, says Trump is so vile that opposition will hold together for a while, but that progressives better stop being afraid of gaining and holding power. And we say hello to Todd Gitlin, professor of journalism and sociology and chair of the PhD program in communications at Columbia University. He was also president of Students for a Democratic Society, an anti-war activist, and he's the author of the book, The 60s, Years of Hope, Days of Rage. Todd Gitlin, thanks very much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
My pleasure.
And it's nice to have you with us as well. You know, there is a huge anti-Trump movement that sprang up with the Women's March on Washington. Is this kind of mass action likely to succeed, given the left's propensity to splinter?
Well, it's already, I think, succeeded at one thing, but we should not have illusions about what makes things happen. Mobilizations are important, and the women's marches, I think, very clearly activated a lot of people, energized them, made a certain number of them, a knowable number, resolve to do something beyond the immediacies of the 100 days. How many of them will actually follow through with a 1,000-day program, a 1,000-day schedule of activity, a 1,000-day entry into the Democratic Party to promote progressive policies and candidates and recruitment, as the Tea Party did so successfully in the Republican Party? I don't know. Nobody knows. It's too soon to tell. But I note lots of spontaneous activity. The Women's March, came out of an impromptu gathering on the web. But then look at the outpouring to the airports on Saturday. Look at the way not only did people protest, but the lawyers group sent people out, or I should say lawyers from the lawyers group dispatched themselves to the airports to help. So there's a lot of this sort of thing going on, bubbling up. It's very hard to keep up with it. It's very hard to monitor it. But there's a good deal of it. Now, what we don't know, what nobody knows, is whether those who've been outraged and appreciate the magnitude of the emergency we're in are going to be able to keep it up, to keep the fire on Trump, but also to give them no moment of rest, but also to create ongoing organization that that's here to stay. That we don't know.
Mm-hmm. It's encouraging, though, to see what we're seeing. I mean, given, in the past where we've seen Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, that kind of things, all of a sudden those things, those movements aren't quite as much in the conversation. There's our key. If we can keep this thing going, then maybe we get somewhere with it.
Well, Occupy Wall Street was a moment more than a movement. Now, some people graduated, as it were, from the encampments and went on to work in other projects, including the Bernie Sanders campaign. Black Lives Matter, it's very hard for me at least, to discern what kind of sustained organization there is. I mean, it was capable of galvanizing activity, but through its name. But my impression is that locally, it's a sometime thing. So I think that Trump is so broadly and deeply and fundamentally offensive and vile in the eyes of Democrats and even people who aren't sure they're Democrats, who are simply patriotic Americans who are appalled at in effect, the coup d'etat that's taken place. I think that the amalgam will hold for a certain point. And what's the certain point? Well, it will behoove all the participants in this movement to appreciate that they have a common purpose, a commonality. They may not agree on every issue, but they need to converge on a core, just the way Republicans converge on a very simple set of propositions. Government is wicked, taxes are evil, and authority is good. Okay, Democrats are far more dispersed in identity groups, in groups with divergent approaches, divergent imperatives. Remains to be seen whether our side can play a solidarity game going forward.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we can count on Trump to be so odious that the American people will easily understand the threat, or do progressives have to work in other ways as well?
He is so odious as to violate the sense of decency and decorum that most Americans feel. At least that's what the polls are saying so far. So yes, I think that can be counted on. It's certainly something to promote, and keeping it up steadily, and underscoring all the ways in which his policies violate reason, evidence, as well as American decency, is an important part of the program. Whether, at what point the normal Republicans, let's call them, that is to say, those who are fanatical on questions of government and taxes, but not thrilled with Trump as their leader, remains to be seen where the watershed moments are for those Republicans. What will he do where they'll have to, or some of them will feel so much pressure from their constituents that they'll feel they better get off this bandwagon. So one issue that's already cropped up as a watershed on the right is the what to do about the Affordable Care Act. So you have hundreds of people who don't want it trashed, who show up at least one Republican congressman's town meeting. I saw this going around in Aurora, Colorado. The congressman was so appalled and freaked out and ill-prepared to address 150 angry constituents that he snuck out the back door and had the misfortune of being caught on camera by local TV, which put up that image. If there's more of that going on, then what there's potential for is the sort of the Tea Party movement, in which you have dissenters who make noise and simply refuse to let ordinary business as usual proceed. Then as the minds of the Republican congressmen and women are concentrated on 2018, some of them will find ways to say more or less politely tiptoe away from Trump. But how impressive they will be, I think it will depend a lot on what they're getting in their constituencies and what they're getting from the polls. As long as Trump stays below 40% in popularity, I think any reasonably opportunistic, reasonably rational Republican has to ask how far he wants to take this train.
Okay, we're speaking with Todd Gitlin, professor of journalism and sociology and chair of the PhD program in communications at Columbia University, also the author of the book The 60s, Years of Hope, Days of Rage. Todd, you cite the Koch brothers as having financed the Tea Party movement. How does the progressive movement counter that? Is it just a matter of money?
No, I mean, the Tea Party had three advantages, in my view. One was tons of money, Koch brothers central to that. Secondly, media. They have a wholly owned propaganda network at their disposal. And it should be remembered, the original call to the Tea Party was issued not even on Fox News, but on CNBC. But the third thing they have going for them is that they believe in authority and structure. They're not afraid of power. And the left is more loosey-goosey, more horizontalist, more suspicious of power. And that really needs to change if we're to make good on, if we're to overcome the miserable failures of the last decades, including not least the loss of the states, the state governorships and legislatures, which has a lot to do with not only state policy but also with redistricting and with infringements on voting rights. So There are donors who are stepping up. I mean, I was at a meeting of Democratic donors who seem to get the point. Whether they can match the Koch brothers is something I'm not in a position to know. But I do think that many Democratic donors I spoke with at this meeting and am in touch with certainly understand that building the Democratic Party so that it's no longer simply a shell, a fundraising outfit for campaigns. I think they get it. Now, how many in the population at large, how many of the people who say went to Washington for the Women's March will appreciate that now they need to roll up their sleeves and get to work and do some of the nitty-gritty, running for office and recruiting and coming up with programs. I don't know yet how many people are hearing that call, but I think some do.
You described the Koch brothers organization, Americans for Prosperity, as a parallel of the Republican Party. How should progressives be building perhaps something akin to that, to working outside but parallel to the Democratic Party?
Well, I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of the legal status of PACs and super PACs and all that. It may very well be that there's no cluster of people on the left who are as powerful and wealthy as the Koch brothers are on the right. So probably what will develop on the left is a more diffuse, more decentralized network of infrastructure builders, let's say. But I'm not close enough to that world to know how well that's going. I think a lot of people appreciate, a lot of Democrats, a lot of people perhaps also who didn't vote and thought, in the immortal words of Jill Stein, that there was no difference between Trump and Hillary Clinton, have not only come to their senses, but realize they now have duties, they have obligations that they fail to discharge quite pointedly. And maybe they will begin to rethink what they think they know about American politics. Mm-hmm.
Given the outstanding and astounding Democratic losses in Congress and state houses and now the White House, and given Trump's hostile takeover of the Republican Party, quite frankly, is our traditional party system dead?
Well, it's not dead as long as we have the Constitution, which we inherited from the late 18th century. It is so hard to because we have a presidential system and a first-past-the-post election system, and we have this rinky-dink Rube Goldberg, contraption called the Electoral College. Only once in American history has a major party been displaced by another, and that was it took slavery to accomplish that mission and produce the Republican Party in 1856. It's just too damn hard to do. So I don't see, you don't have to love the two-party system. You don't have to think it's the best possible system for a democratic government, but it's there. I mean, there are things you may not love. We live, many of us live in, really, ugly cities and crowded and unhealthy places and so on. But there it is, that you got to go out and breathe the air on the street, and this is the air on the street. So I don't see any. So the parties can go on being these peculiar shells in which the base is increasingly at odds with the establishment. But I don't see how the parties get obliterated. I don't. We talk metaphorically about the parties collapsing and so on, but I don't see it. I don't see how.
Okay. Todd Gitlin, again, professor of journalism and sociology, chair of the PhD program in communications at Columbia University. His book, The 60s, Years of Hope, Days of Rage. Todd, thank you so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. We do look forward to having you back again soon.
You betcha.
And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to keep the AmericasDemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, on the air, and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. And now Bill Press talks with Steve Phillips about Democratic electoral prospects.
And with us here for this half hour to talk political news of the day, particularly Steve Phillips, author of the book Brown is the New White, senior fellow at the Great Center for American Progress. Steve, it's good to see you. Again, welcome to Washington. I want to ask you, I want to come back to your book because it's been a while since we talked about it. But, I mean, how important is this emerging new Latino vote, brown is the new white?
Yeah, so it's I think it's important partly because Trump is so draconian and cavalier with what he's doing. It gives a sense of feeling that we actually don't represent the majority within the country in terms of, and it's important to remember 2008, 2012, 2016, the majority of people voted for the Democrat. And so that's what I talk about as a new American majority consisting of progressive whites and people of color, the overwhelming majority of people of color and a meaningful minority of progressive whites. Clinton got 37%, Obama had 39%. That is the majority, in that Trump only snuck in through a quirk of 78,000 votes in those three states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So that's what we've actually just come out with a report called Return of the Majority, roadmap taking back our country, and really emphasizing the majority part, and that there were 10 states that we lost by single digits, and that if we start building and investing now and increasing the turnout in those areas, that's the prescription for being able to actually take back the country in terms of the presidential piece. And big turnout is also going to be important in terms of being able to win these House seats, too. That's something people don't actually fully appreciate. We started to see in Georgia and with Kansas as well.
Right. We'll talk about those particularly. So of the progressive whites and people of color, right, particularly Latinos and African Americans, how do you remember what did Hillary run among African Americans?
She was it was right around 90%. She had like 94% of the African American women and about 84% or so of African American men. There's a lot of dispute around the Latino numbers, but it was right around the 70%.
Around 70%, right. And among white progressives?
So you got 37% of the white vote overall.
30% of the white vote, I should say.
Yes.
And Donald Trump got 39%. Is that?
No, I think she got 37% of the whites, and then
I think got
right. But actually, there was a significant third and fourth party vote, which is also very important people to understand. There were 5 million more third and fourth party votes this last year than there were in 2012, and that the drop off and it's important people to understand because there's all this all this kind of angst and worry about the existential crisis, and have to go talk to the Trump voters and get them back. That's not why we lost. We lost because Democratic voters defected third and fourth party. Trump actually got fewer votes in Wisconsin than Romney did, but more Democratic votes defected from Democrats to Johnson and Stein. So that's what actually happened in terms of how we lost that.
Well, that's one of the things that I thought was so fascinating that we didn't talk enough about is this was not some surge on Donald Trump's part.
Exactly.
This is not Donald Trump tapping into I mean, look, I think he did tap into something that we didn't necessarily see coming, but not in some gigantic way that it was this wave election.
Right. And it's very important, the implications of that. Because then do we have to go get those people back, or do we have to solidify the progressive vote? And that's what happens. We got divided, and Trump snuck in the middle in there.
How did Hillary miss the boat on the white vote?
Well, she kind of missed the white vote and on the African American vote, and so there was such so much caution in their DNA in terms of not taking any risk
on the part of those in the campaign,
right?
Yeah,
and so there was very little done, and there's such fear of alienating the white swing voters that they wouldn't take any strong stand. So Trump ran a fundamentally unapologetic, racist, misogynistic, and xenophobic campaign. And the response from the Clinton campaign was, well, he has a bad personality. And so they did not challenge people to take a stand against that kind of behavior. And so it allowed it to be excused. And so it's a different thing to say, if they're saying that that's the racist, sexist campaign, then there's something wrong with you if you're part of that campaign. If you're just saying, well, he's a bad guy, then there's something wrong with him. And so it makes it more acceptable. So they were unable to draw that line, challenge people to be better, and to explicitly call out the campaign for what it was. They're unable to, too many Democrats are unable to be effective in the context of a really polarized, particularly racially polarized environment, and really don't know what to say and try to ignore it. And obviously that didn't work.
And those who defected to third or fourth party, is that because, again, Hillary was not willing to go far enough left, or?
I think that was a lot. I mean, clearly there was there was a tremendous enthusiasm around Bernie Sanders' campaign, and there was not a sense for a number of reasons. I think it was a number of reasons. The election is close. You could take any of these different pieces, but part of it was that she did not inspire people to feel like we're going to be on this crusade to bring about ending any inequality in the country. And so that, I think, was a critical piece. I do think there was an element, I think in terms of the kind of latent sexism around, well, I don't like her, et cetera, that type of thing. And I don't think we can dismiss that. But actually, I heard shortly after the election, Elizabeth Warren speak. And it was just striking the juxtaposition in terms of, like, there's no question whose side she is on, and the forcefulness around a populist economic agenda.
Right. Which you hear from a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren, and not necessarily so clearly from Hillary, for sure.
There is something to be said about your comment about sexism, though, because even if you look at
it was a factor.
It absolutely was a big factor, and I think that me personally, right? Like I think I learned it is. You can get away with a lot when you're running against a woman. You can say some terrible, terrible things and be completely allowed to say them. And I think it's really interesting now that the Republicans, their sort of boogeymen, if you will, are Elizabeth Warren and Nancy Pelosi. This is who they're falling back to, right? Like you don't see them coming after Chuck Schumer as much as they go after Nancy Pelosi or Elizabeth Warren, because you can do that.
Right.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move forward now, where after the big loss, all the talk about we've got to revitalize the Democratic Party. Both Keith Ellison and Tom Perez said 50-state strategy. We're going to compete everywhere, and we're going to bounce back. And then we have 3 special elections coming up. One, two have happened now. Democrats didn't win either one. In Kansas, they didn't even compete. They took the old line that I've heard for so many years that there's no way we could win that race, and so we're not even going to spend a dime in it. Well, you sure as hell can't win it if you don't play, right?
Right.
Now, Georgia, they did, but let's start. Did they make a mistake in Kansas?
Yeah, well, I think what the mistake that kind of everyone is making is not correctly analyzing the numbers around what it actually takes to win these races. And so there is this presumption that, and then even the media has this piece around, well, the opportunity is because Trump is not popular, and so people will turn against him. But the real opportunity is that there are more Democrats in these districts than people realize, and there's likely to be, and there usually is, a drop-off in participation on both sides.
Yeah.
There's a lack of enthusiasm. It's a midterm race.
Sure,
it's not as high. And so that's the opportunity. If you can hold and keep energized the Democratic voters, the Republicans are not as motivated now. They've got the president, they got Obama out, they got all the elections they wanted, so they're not as angry and riled up a bit. So that's the opening. And so that's how we came close in Georgia and in Kansas. And I think that's also the opportunity in Montana. There are, in the Georgia race, for instance, there's 125,000 people voted Democrat in November, even if in a district that's always goes to the Republicans. And so that's a core number. And Ossoff was able to get 93,000 votes. But it's not, there are enough Democrats in a low turnout race to be able to win. And so that's the strategic error people are making, is to think that you have to be more moderate, where in fact what you need to do is inspire and motivate and turn out the Democrats. That's the strategy for winning a low turnout race.
Right. So you're saying that Democrats got 125,000 in November in that district?
The congressional candidate did.
The congressional candidate
Right.
did. Right. And Ossoff then didn't even get as many as.
Well, he got 93,000, but the drop off was much less. So they actually did a pretty good job of getting people back out in that race, versus the Republican drop off was much more significant. And that's kind of what's taking place across the board. And I actually hadn't even realized this myself. I went back and looked at the 2006 numbers when Democrats took control. The narrative is that, well, they moved, Rahm Emanuel got more moderate candidates, and that's actually how they won. But actually what happened, and I didn't even realize this until I just did these numbers this week, the Republican drop-off in 2006 was 20 million voters. The Democratic drop-off was just 10 million voters. That's how we picked up the House in 2006. And then it flipped in 2010, and the Democratic drop-off was huge, and the Republican drop-off was not.
So something as old-fashioned as get out the vote. Right.
That's the whole ball game. And so that's the thing that people need to realize. And that's the opportunity, because the Democrats are so motivated and energized right now, turning that into a get out the vote effort, and particularly in the key areas. Right. We need 24 seats. There are 23 Republican-held seats that Clinton won, those districts. And so if we do a major voter turnout effort in those seats, that's how we can actually take back the House.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Eddie Goldberg, Todd Gitlin, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us. Support the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.